Okay. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to another edition of Corby Connection. I am Rick Stahl, president of Notre Dame Club of Gettysburg. In the spirit of God, country, and Notre Dame, tonight we're going to focus on country. Everyone knows that Notre Dame has a long history with Navy, United States Navy, and tonight we are very honored and very pleased to have with us Lieutenant Thomas Verbeek, a native of Wading River, New York, a 2011 graduate of the United States Naval Academy in Annapolis, Maryland. Before we bring in Tom, as usual, we're bringing in our great host, Pat Colley. Pat?
Thank you, Rick. And Tom, thanks so much for your time. As Rick said, God, country, Notre Dame is one of the cherished mantras of our beloved university, and country comes even before Notre Dame. And you are a wonderful guest to have because you bring both the tradition of the Naval Academy as well as your time at Notre Dame, both as a student and as an instructor. And I can't wait to hear more about that. First, I'm wondering how much of Notre Dame's history with the armed forces you were aware of, because you had graduated from the Naval Academy, you were selected as a naval aviator, you served in various capacities around the globe, and then you came to Notre Dame to teach in the Naval ROTC program. And Notre Dame is a place where, going back to 1859, I think, is the earliest record of students organizing in companies to serve in the armed forces. And then in the Civil War, of course, with our own namesake, Father Corby, up through the 1920s and 1950s, when the government started to actually provide the facilities Notre Dame provided the facilities to the government to train. We just over time established this relationship that Notre Dame holds dear. How much of that were you aware of when you decided to come to Notre Dame?
Yeah. Well, first of all, thank you for having me, Rick and Pat. I appreciate it. Real honor to be here and to be speaking with you both on a topic I love myself and Notre Dame. But yeah, the history of it, the kind of military history, has been familiar for a long time. I was actually at the Naval Academy as a freshman the year that Navy broke that 44-year losing streak against Notre Dame in football. So, of course, that tradition lived on, and we learned a lot about kind of the history. I remember being really impressed with the relationship between the Notre Dame fans and us as midshipmen during a time when you'd think they'd be sour about losing that game. They were just so fantastic to us. And through a lot of those people, I learned a lot of that history. And kind of it's been with me ever since learning that.
So you arrived at Notre Dame to be an instructor in the Naval ROTC program. My take on the ROTC program was that I always understood it, although I was not a participant myself, as it was one of the larger programs at a non-service academy. As far as private universities and public universities, there are future officers in the Navy, the Marine Corps, and the Army training there at Notre Dame. So how much about the ROTC program did you know before arriving there?
Sure. Yeah, it is one of the largest. Certainly, it's one of the only universities that has Army, Navy, Air Force, and Marine Corps all represented in the ROTC program. It's extremely rare to have that. It is definitely among the top largest for scholarship students every year, and we're really well known for producing really high caliber nuclear engineer officers as well, which again, we don't get from a lot of other places in the country. I wasn't too familiar with ROTC. In fact, until I got to the Naval Academy and went on a summer cruise, I didn't know what ROTC was. It just wasn't an option. I thought the only way to commission was through the academy. So I learned that along the way. The unit itself, I really didn't know much about at all. And I kind of stumbled across the job by accident. I was in Iceland on my second deployment with Patrol Squadron 16, and I was about due for orders. So my executive officer at the time had said, hey, ROTC is really tough to come by, but if it happens, I'll let you know. And after a couple schools that popped up and disappeared, Notre Dame was always on that list, but I was told there's not a possibility. It's too far down the road. The timing's wrong. And one night at 11 o'clock Iceland time, and I don't even know when East Coast time, I got a phone call from him that said, hey, Notre Dame popped up. If you want it, we got to respond in 55 minutes, so let me know. So I got on the phone, what I'm sure was a just sour hour of the morning for my then girlfriend, now wife, to say, how do you feel about Indiana? And she didn't answer the phone, so I made a decision for us. And fortunately, she answered 5 minutes later and was excited to go wherever we ended up. So we really happenstanced upon Notre Dame and just incredibly grateful that it worked out the way that it did to end up there. And then I got the opportunity to learn, obviously, so much more about the program. Lieutenant Sean Bakey was my predecessor there, and I spoke with him over the phone a few times, and he just sang its praises and said, really, you're working with a caliber of student that I can't explain how phenomenal they are. So I got to get that preface and then get to see them real time when I finally showed up. I think it was December timeframe, late December, I showed up there to start.
That's a great story of coming to realize it's an option and signing up quickly. And tell me a little bit about what your role was as an instructor in the Naval ROTC program.
Sure. So my official title was Assistant Professor of Naval Science. I, generally speaking, was the fourth class advisor, and that translates to the freshman advisor. Fourth class were freshmen and first class were seniors, and we filled in the ranks in between. So my job was, amongst the many hats I wore there a lot, was recruiting officer. So I'd speak to a lot of these students as high school students, and then help them through the application process, the scholarship process, and then bring them on board. And then once they were on board as our students, I was their mentor, counselor, and instructor, as well as teacher for the first year at the ROTC. So I taught 2 classes. I taught Introduction to Naval Science, which is a very general, this is what the Navy and the Marine Corps are. This are the ships we use. This are the missions we accomplish. This is what it means to be an officer and a leader. And then the second semester, I would teach that same group Maritime Affairs, which was kind of a watered down naval history class. And we basically go through every conflict from the American Revolution through modern times and discuss what the Navy's role was in those conflicts and how, their leadership style should evolve to kind of carry on that tradition of the Navy. So those are what I taught as classes from an academic standpoint. And then in between, my job was to be a general kind of mentor counselor. So meet with all my students at least twice per semester, usually far more often than that. Work with them on their own personal leadership style. How is that coming along? Were they struggling in classes? Why is academics important to military leadership? And kind of building that whole well-rounded student. I think my main job was really to be the first military introduction that they had. A lot of them just came from the civilian world to say, you're on a path now to be a military officer. So let's get you geared up for what that means morally, mentally, and physically across the board.
And that leads right into the next question that I had in mind, which has to do with the demands on the time and the energy of these students who are participating in the ROTC program, because they carry the full course load that they're, just like any other student. But, I remember very well how early in the morning these men and women get up to do PT and to take on these other courses that you were just describing. And in particular, for the students who are pursuing a career in the Navy or the Marine Corps, there are some pretty heightened requirements in terms of math and science and engineering. As a former College of Arts and Letters major, I'm happy to tip my hat to them and say that they were taking courses that were much more rigorous. And so you were a mentor to them when they were balancing the rigor of their academic studies with all of these other demands in the program. As a former midshipman, I'm sure that was just part of, the nature of going to the United States Naval Academy. But, how was that unique, or was it unique for a Notre Dame student?
Sure. Absolutely. And I'll say this, that I got to see a lot of the students that would come in as candidates. So I saw their test scores, and there's no way I would have gotten into their class back when I was applying for these programs. They're just absolutely brilliant, the caliber of student we're bringing in. They are taking on an incredibly demanding course load. Even your arts and letters majors are still taking a full year of physics, a full year of calculus, just high-level classes, weapon systems and engineering systems through the ROTC curriculum that are just demanding high-level science math courses that you wouldn't think an English major or a social science major would need. So incredibly difficult, but not to take credit away from our tier 1 and tier 2, our science and math students. We had engineering students taking 21, 22 credits at a time, still showing up for morning workouts and still meeting their military responsibilities in the ROTC. And most of them doing it without a bit of struggle and largely feeding off each other. So my job was incredibly easy as a mentor to some degree because they did a great job mentoring each other. Usually my job was, hey, you should go talk to first class so-and-so or talk to second class so-and-so. They've been through this struggle. So the students were incredible at helping each other out. Having gone to the Naval Academy and taken a similar curriculum, I was an economics major. So I sympathized with those social science students who had to take the engineering and the physics. I did not do so well in chemistry my first run through. But having seen that, the academic load here at Notre Dame is just as, if not more rigorous than what we took at the Academy for sure.
That's great. I really appreciate that perspective on how they formed some camaraderie, even just with helping each other, because a course load of 21 or 22 credits in a semester is astounding to me, and it doesn't seem to leave much room for sleep. So I would think camaraderie would be very important. Talk to me about the facilities, because I think that those I'm trying to place it in the time frame when you arrived. Was the Pascarilla Center then in use, or what were the facilities for ROTC training?
Sure. I'll say that we were spoiled as instructors, and I think the students to a degree as well. The Pascarilla Center, from my understanding, was established and kind of given to the ROTC unit in the early 90s. I think 1990 might have been when it got put in our hands. It's kind of dedicated. We have the whole top floor to ourselves, so we share it with our Army and Air Force brethren, but we really have our own kind of little leadership workshop up there. So the facilities were phenomenal. If I talk to my counterparts at other universities, I won't knock any in particular, but I will say that Notre Dame does a phenomenal job rolling out the red carpet for the military side of the house, which speaks back to that God, country, Notre Dame component in the military history that Notre Dame has. They really did take great care of us. Hats off to Mr. Eric King, who worked in Loftus. We got to use the indoor football practice facility 3 times a week for our morning workouts. So even when those Indiana winters kicked in, we were still able to work with our students to keep that physical part of the mission moving forward. So we really did have a phenomenal setup. And Pascarilla, kind of in that north, I guess that's the north east corner there of the campus. We were not totally secluded, but still had a little bit of our own space to breathe where we weren't on top of the other academic buildings.
So while you were in this role of instructor and mentor and recruiter for the ROTC program, you also had a very interesting role at Notre Dame, which is to help coordinate military flyovers of the stadium. And I was going to play a bit of a clip, but I don't want to take up too much of your time, and I'll provide it separately when I post this video. You and I discussed it offline, and you said it was an accurate depiction, but it's just a little view into the amazing amount of detail that goes into those flyovers. I think from the perspective of just myself sitting in that stadium while hearing the Band of the Fighting Irish play America the Beautiful, and then the national anthem, and then hearing the roar of the military aircraft flying over, it's simply an unforgettable experience. And I just never stopped and thought how much coordination goes into getting that timing just right. So the last bars of the national anthem are playing, and then the planes come over, because it's not like they can just be hanging up in the air waiting for that and then come flying in. So tell me about your role in setting that all up so that the flyovers come over and provide such an amazing experience for tens of thousands of people.
Absolutely. It's truly impressive what those pilots are capable. And as my background as a pilot in general, I know how my aircraft flies, but it's very different from any other aircraft. So to get the timing right from week to week was the challenge of, well, this plane can accelerate faster, so if we're behind time, he can make it up. But this one's slower, so we need to be ahead of the count. I had a lot of help from Justin McManus, who's directs the band, and he was up there on the roof of the stadium with me as well. And we would kind of work together the week in advance. He'd give me his timing sheet, and I'd share it with our pilots. And typically, our pilots weren't on campus till the day of or the day before, so a lot of that was done kind of remotely. And then they get in the air and you cross your fingers and you have a radio you hope connects to them. And you really hope you hit that mark every time. Either way, it's impressive. But to me, I came from a place in New York where college football was not a big deal. And still, I didn't understand it when I moved to Florida and all these fans were down there. But I got to Notre Dame, and my first experience with Notre Dame football really firsthand was home game under the lights against Michigan for college game day, and I was coordinating the flyover. So there's just no bigger stage than that. And we got the F-15s, I believe, came over that night and hit the timing perfectly. And we were down on the 20-yard line after the flyover, and we watched the game from the 20-yard line with the pilots and then recognized them on the field. So this incredible experience. I called my friend who's been a Notre Dame fan for life and said, hey, I get it now. I get why this is such a big deal. But those pilots are always fantastic. And as long as you can get them on the radio, they're really, really talented. They spend a lot of time training to hit those time on tops the way that I think your video you might be able to mention.
Yeah, and it's because, as you said, there's somebody standing next to you who's speaking to the band, and you're speaking to the pilots, because, you know, in the clip that I was going to play and we'll post separately, you know, I guess sometimes the band goes a little bit longer for whatever reason. You know, they've practiced their routine and they've gotten that down to a science. But who knows if the song is taking, ever so slightly longer than it normally does, your pilots are getting closer. So you have to give them certain amounts of warning. Okay, this song just started, we have exactly this many minutes. And as they're coming in, and meanwhile, the person next to you is talking to the band director. So, I mean, was that stressful?
every single time. And everyone at Notre Dame is going to tell you did a great job, regardless of how it turns out. But there is some pressure. There's so many people involved and so many just moving parts that don't always match up. So you don't want to be the piece that missed that mark. And at a certain point, the planes are coming in at 3 miles a minute, and the band is halfway through the song, and there's really nothing you can change at that point. So the setup is really the big part of it. But being in Justin's ear a lot, so he's talking to the band, I'll talk to the planes. And at a certain point, the pilots know, they hear the rhythm. And frankly, the answer to it sometimes is I'd hold the key down on the mic and just hold it up over the stadium and let them hear the last couple of notes of the song, so they know exactly when that timing was, and they'd hit it on the mark more often than not.
Well, that's amazing. I thought it was memorable to be sitting in the stadium and experience that, but to be the one orchestrating it, the rush must have been incredible.
And you're on top kind of on your own. It's just you, a couple camera operators, and the band director there with a few security personnel to help you. So you really kind of feel like you're experiencing it on your own, watching down as everybody else experiences it. I think just as cool as the flyover itself was watching the fans in the stands kind of rise up as it happened. And getting to think that you had some small part of that experience for them.
Sure. So while you're there and at Notre Dame, and you are a mentor and an instructor and a recruiter in the Naval ROTC program, and you're up on top of the stadium and organizing these flyovers, you're also a student yourself. So you were a student at the Mendoza College of Business, which over time has become one of the leading business colleges in the nation, and you are to be commended for getting in. I mean, that's very impressive as an accomplishment for you. So you were doing this as a student in your spare time. Was this the executive MBA program? So you're working a long day, and then you're a student in your spare time. So tell me about that experience.
Yeah, it was an honor to get in and to be part of it. And frankly, when I found out I was coming to Notre Dame, the plan was always to try and shoot for that MBA or some kind of master's degree while I was here. The question did come down to the time balance. And I had actually a lot of support from my executive officer at the unit and my commanding officer there, who were able to work with me on the schedule. The executive MBA is a phenomenal program because it only meets 3 times a month. So you do 8 hours of class 3 days in a row on a Thursday, Friday, Saturday, once per month. So you could kind of front load your work and mentor all your students the first 3 weeks of the month, knowing you were going to be gone those 2 days of the work day. And they started to understand it after a while too. So that Wednesday before I'd leave, I'd get a lot of messages in my office trying to wrap things up. But then you work real hard that Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and the rest was kind of coordinated on your own time. A lot of Zoom calls with your teams and with the instructors through the MBA program, who were phenomenal as well. So it was a lot of self-discipline and self-work in the after hours, a lot of patience on my wife, listening to me talk MBA jargon in the other room while she was working at her own desk in the other office. But it was worth every bit of it. I met some really incredible people through the executive MBA. And it's to have a program like that can offer you an MBA from a school like Notre Dame while you're still a full-time working professional is incredible. And as a result, I got to meet other working professionals who were, working in their own companies and their own industries while also doing this job. So there was a lot of times where you'd see them step out of class, or one of us had to take an email. And it was just a good understanding amongst one another that there was a lot of kind of teamwork to make that happen. Again, everyone in that program is about 50 of us. We're all working full time while also participating in this executive MBA.
So in that respect, the camaraderie that gets built while you are juggling demands on your time are not unlike what your own students were doing. And so I'm sure that helped you to identify with the struggle of balancing all of your demands on your time.
Oh, absolutely. You were never allowed to look like you were stressed to the students, no matter how much you were. So to be able to lean on folks in your own MBA program when you had 4 papers due that weekend, and also the students needed your help, and you had a training to do that afternoon for them, it's invaluable. And that was something that I don't know if it's unique to Notre Dame, but I've never seen it to the degree that I've seen it at Notre Dame. Was that just sense of community and family, and anyone was willing to help, even if they didn't know you that well.
Right. And I think that over time, you have both the Notre Dame network and the Naval Academy network going for your career. You have a long career ahead of you. And I would think that, the richness of that experience carries on now for decades, because, the bonds that you formed and will form are really, I don't know if they're unique to Notre Dame and the Naval Academy, but they sure are strong bonds. I know that we have found them in the Notre Dame Club of Gettysburg and our connection with other clubs, and professionally, when you run into another Notre Dame grad, they'll give you the shirt off their back. So hopefully you are finding that already in your career.
Absolutely. We dealt with some kind of medical hardship in my family while I was there, going through the MBA program, and I had message of support and people dropping off gift baskets and meals for me and my wife during that hard time. Some of them I had only spoken with once before, but there was that sense of community at Notre Dame, and I heard dozens of stories like it that, hey, Notre Dame will rally around you, and they did. And now as I'm moving into the professional world, I'll be wrapping up my career in the Navy here in the next few months. I've exercised what I told would be a phenomenal alumni network, and I've sent out an email within 24 hours. I've got a response from some alumni of Notre Dame I'd never met halfway across the country who can't wait to talk to me because I'm Irish as well. So it's the rumors are true.
That's fantastic. So that's the final set of questions I wanted to ask is, I just get a glimpse of the amazing list of accomplishments professionally that you have amassed since graduating from the Naval Academy in 2011. First of all, you were selected as a naval aviator. How many people who are midshipmen go on to a career as aviators as opposed to some other type of service in the Navy?
I think it's roughly 20%, or it was when I was there. About 20% of us got selected for aviation, either pilot or naval flight officer. And then I don't know what the attrition numbers are from there, but I think the estimate is we lose another 20 to 30% in the flight school pipeline from there.
I always understood it to be somewhat elite, and I'm assuming that Top Gun hasn't lied to me, and it's mostly flying planes and having fun and playing volleyball on the beach, but it's still impressive nonetheless. But after you graduated, you were selected in this elite, among the elite, to be a naval aviator. You were in Oklahoma, you were in Florida for flight school, you got your Wings of Gold, and then you had various assignments in countries around the world. Can you tell me a little bit about that, and feel free to stop wherever it's not for public consumption?
Absolutely. Sure. I got my wings in Corpus Christi, Texas, after 3 different stages of flight school. It took me through Oklahoma, Pensacola, Florida, and ultimately ended up in Jacksonville, Florida, where I flew the P-8 Poseidon was my aircraft. So we were primarily an anti-submarine and reconnaissance aircraft, so a lot of hunting submarines at low altitude. My first deployment took me to the Pacific, so China, largely Japan, the Philippines, other places in the kind of South China Sea area. My second one was over in the Northern Atlantic, so we did a little bit in the Mediterranean, worked mostly out of Italy, saw Norway, Iceland, as I said earlier. I think I've hit 14 countries now across my 2 deployments, so the Navy's forcibly made me a man of the world to some regard. And then I did get a really unique opportunity between deployments to assist in the Hurricane Matthew relief in 2016. If you recall, Hurricane Matthew came through the Caribbean and hit Jermaine, Haiti really hard. We evacuated our aircraft out of Jacksonville because it then came up the coast and hit Florida. So we were working out of Pensacola, and I got a really unique chance to fly the P-8 down to Haiti right behind the wake of the hurricane. Essentially, we knew that there had been no eyes on the country since the storm hit. We didn't know the extent of the damage, and we didn't really know where to send help or how to send it. So my crew was tasked with flying down there to provide that, which was a really unique opportunity for me because it was my first time flying as a plane commander. I'd always been the junior pilot, and this was my first day as a senior pilot who signed for the aircraft and was the #1 in charge. I think the oldest person on our crew that day was 27 years old. And we went down and flew 8.5 hours mapping Haiti, calling in Coast Guard assets, communicating with the Air Force and the Mexican Navy as well to get assistance to Haiti. And I think to this day, that's still the most rewarding flight that I had, was that assist the disaster relief to Haiti in 2016. So in between my deployments, but definitely one that I'll remember forever and super rewarding part of that naval experience.
It must be rewarding because Haiti was so completely devastated, and they didn't have a whole lot of resources to begin with. So the human suffering could have been worse if not for your your planning and your being there right after the storm to call in the kinds of help that they so desperately needed. So I imagine that that will be a good feeling for having served humanity that will sustain you for a long time.
Absolutely.
Any idea what comes next? Are you allowed to share that? You said you're wrapping up your service. What comes next for Tom?
Sure. So I'm currently stationed in Norfolk, Virginia. I left Notre Dame, I guess it was probably about 2 months ago. I got here in early October, and I've been assigned to the George Washington aircraft carrier, which is currently in kind of an overhaul state. So we're basically getting the ship ready to go back out to sea and kind of putting some new components on it and shining the brass and cleaning the beds to get it back out and in full service again. So it's kind of become an industrial job to some degree, while also managing sailors in this kind of unique part of the life cycle of the ship, which has been a really cool experience for me as well. My naval career comes to a 10.5 year end. I think up here on the horizon, I'll be getting out roughly in the June to July timeframe and going on to the civilian world. Had a phenomenal career in the Navy, loved every bit of it. Would recommend it to anyone and everyone who's interested in kind of that different lifestyle, that different take on your 20s. But as my wife and I have kind of gotten into our 30s now, and we're starting to talk about a family, we've decided to go ahead and find that white picket fence somewhere and start looking for the next thing. So we'll be settling down and looking for a job kind of out in that big open ocean of the civilian world next.
Well, I would say that you have earned it. I mean, to be entering your 30s with service in countries all over and making a true impact on the world in the way that you have, I'd say you earned the right to settle down, and I'm sure it sets you up for all kinds of success. Tom, I wanted to tell you that the Notre Dame Club of Gettysburg regularly does service projects to support soldiers, sailors, and Marines and airmen around the world. It means a lot to us that you would share your time and your experiences with us, and I hope that you'll stay in touch with us. But your experiences are moving and impressive, and it was just really a joy to talk to you.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that, Pat. I think I'm allowed to say it publicly, but Rick's son, Patrick, is actually my roommate at the Naval Academy. So the Club of Gettysburg was actually my first introduction to the Notre Dame clubs across the country. So I think I have no choice but to stay in touch with you folks over time.
Well, we're glad to hear it. And I'll kick it back to Rick to close us out.
Excellent.
Okay, thank you, Tom. Again, on behalf of the Notre Dame Club of Gettysburg, thanks for taking your time and with us this evening. Like you said, being a parent of a proud naval grad, it's very, very enlightening to know that we have young men like you in our military to keeping us safe. And like Pat said, on behalf of a club here, wish you well, wish your family well. We wish you a Merry Christmas and good luck in your endeavors. And as always, go Irish. And there's somebody else that wants to say hello.
Hello.
Oh, Mrs. Tom, it's good to see you.
Cut that part out.
It's staying in.
Again, Patrick is living his dream too. As you know, he's out at Notre Dame at the Mendoza College, pursuing his MBA. So I'm sure he's keeping you in touch.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Okay. Thank you again. Thank you very much, Pat.
Go Irish.
Yep. Go Irish. Thanks, Tom.
Thanks so
Please
much.
stay in touch.
Absolutely. Pleasure talking with you tonight. Thanks for having me.
Yep. Take care.
Bye now.